In the shadowed halls of Marston Hall, a scream pierces the night, and Clara Henshaw lies dead. A dagger in her heart, her sapphire necklace vanished. Was it Victor Langston, his gloves stained with blood, or a darker secret lurking among the guests, as Hercule Poirot unravels a web of blackmail, hidden compartments, and cryptic notes? Every guest Charles with his jealous rage, Lady Eleanor with her buried shame, Mrs. Fowler with her stolen treasures, hides a motive. Clues mount: a drugged sherry glass, a blood-stained shawl, a mysterious he in Clara's diary. But in the final gathering, Poirot's little grey cells will expose the killer, a truth so cunning, so shocking, it will leave Marston Hall forever changed. Who wielded the dagger? The answer waits in the shadows. Chapter 1. The incident at Marston Hall. Hercule Poirot stood before the tall, gilded mirror in his London flat, adjusting the precise knot of his silk bow tie with the meticulous care of a man who believed perfection was not merely an aspiration, but a necessity. His small, nimble fingers, ever so steady, smoothed the lapels of his immaculate dinner jacket. The invitation to Marston Hall, a grand estate nestled in the rolling hills of Hertfordshire, had arrived 3 days prior, penned in the bold, flourishing hand of Sir Reginald Marston, a retired diplomat known for his opulent gatherings and an almost theatrical zest for society. Poirot, whose curiosity about the intricacies of human behaviour was as insatiable as his penchant for order, had accepted, without hesitation, a weekend among the English elite. He mused, was a canvas upon which the most revealing portraits of character could be painted. Captain Arthur Hastings, his loyal friend and occasional confidant, had been delighted at the prospect of accompanying him. A proper country house party, Poirot, Hastings had exclaimed, his eyes alight with the enthusiasm of a schoolboy. There'll be fine dinners, perhaps a spot of dancing, and who knows, maybe a mystery or two to keep you entertained. Poirot had merely smiled, his moustache twitching slightly, for he knew that where people gathered, secrets invariably followed. The journey to Marston Hall was a pleasant one, the train gliding through the verdant countryside as the late autumn sun cast golden hues over fields and hedgerows. Poirot, seated in a first-class compartment, observed the landscape with a detached appreciation, his mind already turning to the guests he would meet. Sir Reginald's invitation had mentioned a small but distinguished party, his wife, Lady Eleanor, a woman of refined beauty and reputed intellect, their son, Charles, a young man whose reputation for brooding intensity preceded him, and a select group of friends, among them a certain Mr. Victor Langston, whose name Poirot recalled from a fleeting mention in a society column, man of charm, wealth, and an air of mystery. Marston Hall itself was a vision of Georgian splendour, its pale stone facade glowing softly in the dusk as Poirot and Hastings arrived by motor car from the station. The driveway, lined with ancient oaks, wound through manicured lawns to a grand portico where liveried footmen awaited. Poirot stepped out, his polished shoes crunching lightly on the gravel, and inhaled the crisp air, tinged with the scent of wood smoke and fading roses. Magnifique, he murmured, his eyes sweeping over the symmetrical windows and the ivy that clung decorously to the walls. Hastings, less restrained, let out a low whistle. I say, Poirot, this is the real thing. Makes one feel like a character in a novel. Inside, the hall was no less impressive. The entrance foyer, with its marble floor and soaring chandelier, opened into a series of rooms adorned with tapestries, portraits, and the gleam of polished mahogany. Sir Reginald greeted them with the hearty exuberance of a man who thrived on company. He was a broad-shouldered figure in his late 50s, his ruddy face framed by a mane of silver hair, his voice carrying the authority of one accustomed to command. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, welcome to Marston Hall," he boomed, shaking their hands with vigor. "I trust you'll find our little gathering to your liking. We've a splendid weekend planned, music, dancing, and the finest claret. From my cellar." Lady Eleanor, standing at his side, offered a more restrained welcome. She was tall and slender, her auburn hair swept into an elegant chignon, her green eyes assessing Poirot with a quiet intelligence. "We are honored to have you, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice smooth as velvet. "My husband speaks highly of your reputation." Poirot bowed, noting the faint tension in her smile, as though she carried a burden she was careful to conceal. The other guests were introduced in the drawing room, where a fire crackled in a massive hearth, casting flickering shadows across the damask wallpaper. Charles Marsden, the son, was a lean young man with sharp features and dark eyes that seemed to hold a perpetual challenge. He acknowledged Poirot with a curt nod, his manner suggesting a preference for solitude over pleasantries. Beside him stood Miss Clara Henshaw, a young heiress whose delicate beauty was accentuated by a sapphire necklace that gleamed at her throat. Her laughter was light, almost musical, but Poirot detected a calculated charm in her glances, as though she were playing a role for an unseen audience. Then there was Mr. Victor Langston, whose appearance immediately drew Poirot's attention. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored evening suit, his blonde hair swept back, his smile easy yet guarded. What struck Poirot most were his gloves, pristine white, an unusual choice for a man not in formal service, and worn with a casual elegance that suggested habit rather than affectation. "A pleasure, Monsieur Poirot," Langston said, his voice carrying a faint trace of an accent perhaps continental, though Poirot could not place it. "I've heard you have a knack for unraveling puzzles. I hope our little party proves diverting." The remaining guests included Mrs. Beatrice Fowler, a widow with a sharp tongue and a penchant for crimson gowns that clashed vividly with her greying hair, and Dr. Henry Walsh, a reserved physician whose spectacles and quiet demeanor suggested a man more comfortable with books than people. There was also Miss Evelyn Carter, a young artist whose bohemian air and direct manner contrasted sharply with the polished restraint of the others. Dinner was a lavish affair, served in a dining room adorned with crystal and silver. The conversation flowed as freely as the wine, touching on politics, art, and the latest London gossip. Poirot, seated between Lady Eleanor and Miss Henshaw, listened more than he spoke, his keen eyes noting the undercurrents beneath the polite banter. Charles Marston, opposite him, seemed distracted, his gaze often drifting to Clara, who responded with fleeting smiles that held more tease than warmth. Langston, meanwhile, was the epitome of charm, regaling the table with tales of his travels. In the Orient, though Poirot noted he revealed little of himself, as the meal concluded, Sir Reginald proposed a toast to friendship, to beauty, and to the mysteries of life, he declared, raising his glass. The guests echoed the sentiment, their voices mingling with the clink of crystal. Poirot sipped his wine, his mind alert to the subtle tensions in the room, the way Lady Eleanor's hand tightened on her glass, the way Charles avoided his father's gaze, the way Langston's eyes lingered on Clara's necklace. The evening progressed to the ballroom, a magnificent space with polished parquet floors and chandeliers that cast a warm, golden glow. A small orchestra played a waltz, and couples took to the floor, their movements graceful yet somehow charged with an unspoken intensity. Poirot, declining to dance, stood near a marble pillar, observing. Hastings, ever eager, partnered with Miss Carter, whose laughter rang out as they spun across the room. Clara, partnered with Langston, moved with a fluid elegance, her necklace catching the light with every turn. Poirot's gaze followed them, noting the ease with which Langston guided her, his gloved hand resting lightly on her waist. It was nearing 11 o'clock when the atmosphere shifted. The music paused, and a murmur rippled through the crowd. Poirot, sensing a change, turned to see a footman whispering urgently to Sir Reginald, whose face darkened. The host excused himself, and moments later, a piercing scream shattered the air, high and raw, cutting through the hum of conversation like a blade. The guests froze, their faces a tableau of shock and curiosity. Poirot, his senses sharpened, moved swiftly toward the sound, Hastings at his heels. The scream had come from the library, a room adjacent to the ballroom, its heavy oak doors slightly ajar. Sir Reginald was already there, his broad frame blocking the entrance as he barked orders to the staff to keep back. Poirot, undeterred, slipped past him, his small stature an advantage in the chaos. Inside the library, the scene was one of stark horror. Miss Clara Henshaw lay slumped in a backed armchair, her eyes wide and lifeless, her hands folded limply in her lap. A dagger, its hilt intricately carved, protruded from her chest, a dark stain spreading across the pale silk of her gown. The sapphire necklace was gone, its absence as glaring as the blood that pooled beneath her dot. The guests crowded at the doorway, their gasps and murmurs filling the air. Lady Eleanor clutched her husband's arm, her face ashen. Charles stood rigid, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the body. Mrs. Fowler let out a theatrical sob, while Dr. Walsh stepped forward, his professional instincts overriding his shock as he checked for a pulse, only to shake his head gravely. Poirot's gaze swept the room, taking in every detail. The scattered books on a side table, the half-empty glass of sherry on the mantel, the faint smudge of dust on the rug near the chair. His eyes then settled on Victor Langston, who stood apart, his face pale but composed, his hands clasped behind his back. It was then that Poirot noticed it, a single, unmistakable smear of blood on the white glove of Langston's right hand, vivid against the pristine fabric. "Monsieur Langston," Poirot said, his voice calm but carrying an edge that silenced the room. "Perhaps you would care to explain the stain upon your glove." Langston's eyes flickered, but his smile remained. "A regrettable accident, Monsieur Poirot," he replied smoothly. "I found Miss Henshaw moments before the scream. I touched the dagger, thinking to aid her, and must have stained my glove." The explanation was plausible, yet Poirot's instinct stirred. The blood was fresh, the glove otherwise immaculate. Why had Langston been in the library alone, and where was the necklace? The little grey cells, as Poirot called them, began their silent work, piecing together the fragments of a puzzle that promised to be as intricate as it was deadly. Sir Reginald, his voice hoarse with shock, ordered the guests to retire to the drawing room while the staff summoned the authorities. Poirot, however, lingered, his eyes scanning the scene once more. "Hastings," he murmured, "observe the room. It speaks, does it not? The dagger, the necklace, the glove are pieces of a story we must unravel." Hastings nodded, though his expression betrayed his bewilderment. "It's a ghastly business, Poirot. Do you think Langston's our man?" Poirot's moustache twitched. "Nan, mon ami, the obvious is rarely the truth. We must look beyond the blood to the heart of the matter. And the heart, Hastings, is always where the true mystery lies. As the guests dispersed, their whispers trailing like shadows, Poirot stood alone in the library, his mind a whirl of possibilities. The night had begun with the promise of elegance and diversion, but it had ended in death. And Hercule Poirot, with his unerring instinct for truth, knew that the incident at Marston Hall was only the beginning. The library, with its rows of leather-bound volumes and the faint scent of old paper, seemed to hold its breath, as though waiting for Poirot to uncover its secrets. He moved to the armchair, his eyes tracing the position of Clara's body, the angle of the dagger, the absence of struggle. The wound was precise, the work of someone with either skill or desperation. The dagger itself, he noted, was part of a display above the fireplace, one of a pair of antique blades Sir Reginald had proudly shown him earlier. Its twin remained on the wall, untouched. Poirot's gaze shifted to the floor, where a faint trail of dust led from the chair to a side table. He crouched, his fingers brushing the rug, and found a single pearl, small and lustrous, half hidden beneath the table's edge. It was not from Clara's attire, which bore no such adornment. A clue, perhaps, or a careless oversight by the killer. Poirot slipped the pearl into his pocket, his mind already cataloguing its significance. Outside, the wind had risen, rattling the windows and casting eerie shadows across the room. Poirot straightened, his expression one of quiet determination. The blood on Langston's glove was a bold stroke, but it was not the whole picture. The missing necklace, the pearl, the dagger's original were threads in a tapestry of deceit. And Poirot, with his unparalleled gift for seeing the pattern beneath the chaos, was resolved to weave them together as he rejoined the guests in the drawing room. Their faces a mixture of fear and suspicion, Poirot felt the weight of their secrets pressing against him. Marston Hall, with its grandeur and its shadows, was a stage, and the players were all in place. The curtain had risen on a tragedy, and Hercule Poirot would not rest until the final act revealed the truth. Chapter 2. The blood-stained Clutha Library at Marston Hall. Its heavy air, thick with the scent of old leather and the metallic tints of blood, seemed to close in around Hercule Poirot as he stood beside the lifeless form of Miss Clara Henshaw. The flickering light from the chandelier overhead cast long, wavering shadows across the room, lending an almost theatrical quality to the grim tableau. Clara's delicate frame, slumped in the high-backed armchair, was a stark contrast to the vibrancy she had displayed only hours before. Her sapphire necklace now conspicuously absent, her gown stained with the dark bloom of her life's blood. The antique dagger, its hilt a work of intricate silver filigree, protruded from her chest with a precision that spoke of intent, if not expertise. Poirot's sharp eyes, ever alert to the smallest detail, moved methodically over the scene, cataloguing every element with the precision of a watchmaker. Captain Hastings, hovering anxiously at Poirot's side, shifted his weight, his face pale with the shock of the discovery. "Good heavens, Poirot," he murmured, his voice low to avoid the ears of the guests still gathered at the library's entrance, their whispers a restless undercurrent. "This is a dreadful business. That dagger, it's one of Sir Reginald's, isn't it? And Langston's glove. It's damning, don't you think?" Poirot, his hands clasped behind his back, tilted his head slightly, his moustache twitching as though in silent conversation with his thoughts. "Mon ami," he said softly, his voice carrying the calm authority that so often steadied Hastings. "The glove, it is indeed a clue, but a clue is not a conclusion. The blood upon it tells a story, yes, but we must read the entire book before we judge the ending. Observe, if you please, the room itself. It has much to say." Hastings frowned, his honest face betraying his struggle to see beyond the obvious. "The room. Well, there's the body, the dagger, the missing necklace. But what else is there, Poirot? It's a library, not a battlefield." Poirot's lips curved into a faint, enigmatic smile. "Patience, Hastings. The battlefield of the human heart is often fought in quiet places. Come, let us examine." He knelt beside Clara's body, his movements precise and unhurried, as though time itself bent to his will. The dagger, he noted, was embedded at an angle that suggested a single, forceful thrust, delivered by someone standing directly before her. There were no signs of a struggle, no torn fabric, no disarrayed hair, no defensive marks on her hands. Clara had either been taken by surprise or had trusted her assailant. Poirot's fingers, careful not to disturb the scene, traced the air above the wound, estimating the force required. The blow was deliberate, he murmured, almost to himself. Not wild, not frantic. A mind was at work here, Hastings. Rising, he turned his attention to the armchair, its dark green velvet, now marred by the spreading stain. The armrests bore no scratches, no signs of resistance. But Poirot's keen gaze caught a faint irregularity on the right armor smudge. Not of blood, but of something finer, like powder or ash. He leaned closer, his nose twitching as he detected a faint floral scent, perhaps a trace of perfume or face powder. "Curio," he muttered, filing the detail away in the orderly chambers of his mind. The side table beside the chair held a few scattered items, a leather-bound volume of poetry, its pages slightly askew as though hastily opened, a crystal sherry glass, half empty, its contents shimmering in the dim light, and a small silver cigarette case engraved with the initial CH. Poirot opened the case, revealing a handful of cigarettes, their tips untouched by lipstick. "Miss Henshaw did not smoke," he remarked, recalling her earlier refusal of a cigarette offered by Charles Marston. "So why is this here? A visitor, perhaps?" Hastings, peering over his shoulder, ventured a guess. Could it belong to the killer? Langston, maybe? He was in here, after all. Poirot shook his head. "Nan, Hastings, Monsieur Langston does not strike me as a man who leaves such obvious traces. The cigarette case may belong to another, or it may be a distraction. We must not assume." His eyes then fell upon the rug, a rich Persian weave that stretched across the floor. Near the chair, a faint trail of dust, barely visible, led toward the heavy oak bookcases that lined the walls. Poirot followed it, his steps silent, until he reached a section where the dust was disturbed, as though something had been moved. He ran his fingers along the edge of a shelf, finding a hidden catch that released a small panel. Behind it was a narrow compartment, empty save for a single scrap of paper, crumpled and bearing a faint ink smudge. Poirot unfolded it carefully, revealing a fragment of handwriting. "At 11, library." The rest was torn away. But the words were enough to spark a flicker of interest in Poirot's green eyes. "A rendezvous," he said softly. Miss Henshaw was expecting someone, but who? Before he could ponder further, Sir Reginald's voice boomed from the doorway. "Monsieur Poirot, the police have been summoned. Inspector Japp from Scotland Yard is on his way. I trust you'll assist until he arrives." Poirot inclined his head. "But of course, Sir Reginald, it is my duty to ensure the truth is not obscured by haste or assumption." Sir Reginald nodded, though his face was drawn, his earlier joviality replaced by a grim resolve. Lady Eleanor stood beside him, her hands clasped tightly, her eyes darting toward the body with a mixture of horror and something else. Perhaps, or fear. Poirot noted it as he noted everything. He turned his attention to Victor Langston, who had remained near the doorway, his posture composed despite the scrutiny of the other guests. The blood on his glove was dry now, a dark, accusing stain against the white silk. Poirot approached him, his expression neutral, but his eyes sharp as a hawk's. "Monsieur Langston," he said, his voice deceptively mild, "you say you touched the dagger in an attempt to aid Mademoiselle Henshaw. Yet the blood on your glove is curiously precise, a single smear, not the splatter one might expect from such an act. Tell me, how did you come to be in the library at such a moment?" Langston met Poirot's gaze without flinching, though a muscle twitched in his jaw. "I was restless," he said, his tone smooth but measured. "The dancing was pleasant, but I sought a quieter corner to reflect. I wandered into the library and found her, like that. I thought to check for a pulse, but the dagger, well, I touched it, foolishly, and realized she was beyond help. That's when I heard the scream." Poirot nodded, his face betraying nothing. "And the necklace, monsieur, did you notice it? Was missing." Langston hesitated, a fraction of a second too long. "I didn't think to look. My concern was for Clara, not her jewelry." "Naturellement," Poirot said, his tone polite, but laced with an edge that suggested he was not entirely convinced. "Yet the necklace is gone, and such a detail is not easily overlooked, even in distress." As Langston opened his mouth to respond, Inspector Japp arrived, his burly figure filling the doorway with an air of brisk efficiency. "Poirot," he exclaimed, his Cockney accent cutting through the tension. "Should have known you'd be in the thick of it. What's this then? A murder in a country house? Bit theatrical, even for you." Poirot's lips twitched in a faint smile. "Inspector, the theatre of life is never far from tragedy. We have here Mademoiselle Clara Henshaw, killed with a dagger from Sir Reginald's collection, and Monsieur Langston, with blood upon his glove, claims to have found her moments before the alarm was raised." Japp's eyes narrowed as he took in Langston's stained glove. "Right then, looks like we've got our man, or at least a good start. Let's have a look at the scene, shall we?" Poirot raised a hand, his gesture small but commanding. "A moment, Inspector. The scene, it must be preserved. The little details, the glass, the cigarette case, the dust, they speak, if we listen. And the necklace, it is missing. A thief does not kill and leave his prize, Nan," Japp grunted, accustomed to Poirot's methods, but never entirely patient with them. "Fair enough, Poirot. You poke around with your little grey cells, but I'm keeping an eye on Mr. Glove over there." Poirot turned back to the room, his mind a whirl of possibilities. He approached the sherry glass, lifting it carefully to his nose. The scent was unmistakable sherry, but with a faint undertone, bitter and chemical. "Hastings," he said quietly, "this glass must be tested. There is something not right." He then examined the cigarette case more closely, noting its fine craftsmanship and the initials CH. Could it belong to Charles Marsden, whose initials matched? Or was it Clara's, left as a deliberate misdirection? Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by the butler, Mr. Grayson, a thin, meticulous man with a face like a ledger, who approached with a deferential bow. "Monsieur Poirot," Grayson said, his voice low, "I thought you should know Miss Henshaw was seen entering the library at 10:30, alone. She seemed agitated, sir, clutching a small note in her hand. I didn't read it, of course, but I heard her say something about settling matters. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A note. You say, and where is this note now, Monsieur Grayson? The butler shook his head. Gone, sir. I looked after the discovery, but it was nowhere to be found. Merci, Poirot said, dismissing him with a nod. A note, a rendezvous, a missing necklace. The pieces were multiplying, but the picture remained elusive. He glanced at Langston, who stood under Japp's watchful eye, his gloved hands now clasped in front of him, the blood-stain stark against the silk. Was he a fool, as he claimed, or a master of deception? As the guests were ushered back to the drawing-room, Poirot lingered, his gaze sweeping the library once more. The fragment of paper, the sherry glass, the cigarette case, the smudge of powder, they were threads in a tapestry, and Poirot was determined to weave them together. The blood on Langston's glove was a bold stroke, but it was not the whole story. Someone in Marston Hall had killed Clara Henshaw, and that someone had left a trail, however faint. Hercule Poirot, with his unerring instinct for truth, would follow it to its end. The night outside grew darker, the wind howling through the ancient oaks, as though Marston Hall itself mourned the loss of its guest. But Poirot, standing alone in the library, felt only the quiet thrill of the chase. The blood-stained clue was but the beginning, and the little grey cells were already at work, unravelling the mystery that lay hidden in the heart of the grand estate. Chapter 3. The Guests of Marston Hall. The morning after the tragedy at Marston Hall dawned with a heavy pall. The sky over Hertfordshire cloaked in a mist that seemed to mirror the unease within the grand estate. Hercule Poirot, ever punctual, descended the sweeping staircase at precisely 8 o'clock, his polished shoes tapping softly on the marble, his mind as sharp as the crease in his trousers. The events of the previous night, the lifeless form of Clara Henshaw, the glove of Victor Langston, the missing sapphire necklace, had set his little grey cells into a flurry of activity. Breakfast, he knew, would be more than a meal. It would be a stage for observation, where the guests, shaken by murder, might reveal their true natures in unguarded moments. Captain Hastings awaited him in the dining-room, his usually cheerful demeanour subdued as he stirred his tea with unnecessary vigour. Poirot, he said, looking up, I hardly slept a wink. That poor girl stabbed in cold blood, and Langston with that glove. It's all so grim. Do you think he's our man, Poirot? Seating himself with his customary precision, adjusted the alignment of his cutlery before responding. Mon cher Hastings, you are quick to point the finger, but the truth, it is like a fine whodunit, requires time to breathe. Monsieur Langston's glove is a clue, yes, but a clue is merely a thread. We must weave the entire tapestry to see the pattern. Today we observe the guests. Their words, their glances, their silences, they will tell us much. The dining room, with its long mahogany table and tall windows overlooking the mist-shrouded gardens, was a study in restrained opulence. The guests filtered in, their faces etched with varying degrees of shock, suspicion, and fatigue. Sir Reginald Marston, his robust frame seeming diminished by the night's events, took his place at the head of the table, his silver hair slightly dishevelled, a rare lapse in his commanding presence. Lady Eleanor, beside him, was a portrait of composure, her auburn hair immaculate, though her green eyes betrayed a flicker of strain as she greeted Poirot with a polite nod. Charles Marston, their son, entered with a scowl, his dark eyes avoiding the others as he slumped into a chair, his fingers drumming restlessly on the tablecloth. Mrs. Beatrice Fowler, The sharp-tongued widow swept in, wearing a deep burgundy dress that clashed with the somber mood. Her grey curls pinned tightly as though to anchor her defiance. Dr. Henry Walsh, the reserved physician, followed, his spectacles glinting as he murmured a quiet good morning, his hands folded with a precision that rivaled Poirot's own. Miss Evelyn Carter, the young artist, was last, her bohemian air subdued, her auburn curls loose and her eyes red-rimmed, as though she had wept through the night. Victor Langston, notably, was absent, detained by Inspector Japp for further questioning in a parlour converted into a temporary office. The breakfast was served by the butler, Mr. Grayson, whose impeccable demeanour belied the strain of the previous night. Silver trays bore platters of kedgeree, kippers, and poached eggs, but the guests ate sparingly, their appetites dulled by the spectre of murder. Poirot, sipping his café au lait, observed the room with the intensity of a painter studying his canvas. The silences were as telling as the words. Lady Eleanor's careful avoidance of her son's gaze, Charles's clenched jaw as he pushed his food around his plate, Mrs. Fowler's sharp glance at Evelyn Carter when the young artist mentioned Clara's beauty. Such a dreadful thing, Evelyn ventured, her voice soft but carrying in the quiet room. Clara was so alive last night, dancing with Mr. Langston, and now her voice broke and she reached for her tea, her hand trembling. Mrs. Fowler snorted, her fork pausing mid-air. Alive, yes, and far too aware of it. That girl flaunted, her charm like a peacock, and look where it got her. No surprise, someone took offence. Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly, noting the venom in her tone. Madame Fowler, he said, his voice smooth as silk, you speak as though Mademoiselle Henshaw provoked her fate. Did you find her behaviour objectionable? Mrs. Fowler's lips tightened, but she met his gaze with defiance. I'm not one for mincing words, Monsieur Poirot. Clara was a flirt, always dangling herself before the Menschels Langston. Even poor Dr. Walsh. A woman like that invites trouble. Dr. Walsh adjusted his spectacles, his face colouring slightly. I assure you, Mrs. Fowler, I had no such interactions with Miss Henshaw. She was a patient, nothing more. His voice was steady, but Poirot noted the slight tremor in his fingers as he gripped his napkin. Charles Marsden, who had been silent, slammed his fork down, drawing all eyes. Enough of this, he snapped, his voice low but fierce. Clara's dead, and you're all sitting here gossiping like vultures. Have some respect. He pushed back his chair and strode from the room, leaving a heavy silence in his wake. Lady Eleanor's hand tightened on her teacup, but she said nothing, her eyes fixed on the table. Sir Reginald cleared his throat, attempting to restore decorum. Charles is upset, he said gruffly. We all are. Monsieur Poirot, I trust you, and Inspector Japp will get to the bottom of this. Clara was a guest in our home, and this outrage must be answered. Poirot inclined his head. Rest assured, Sir Reginald, the truth will be found, but I must ask for your patience, your cooperation. Each of you, I believe, holds a piece of the puzzle. After breakfast, Poirot requested a private word with Mr. Grayson, whose encyclopedic knowledge of the household made him an invaluable ally. In the butler's pantry, a small room lined with shelves of polished silver, Grayson stood ramrod straight, his expression one of disciplined neutrality. Monsieur Poirot, he began, I have served the Marstons for 20 years. Never have I witnessed such a tragedy. Poirot nodded, his eyes scanning the butler's face for any hint of concealed knowledge. You are a man of observation, Monsieur Grayson. Tell me, what did you see last night, before the scream?" Grayson hesitated, his fingers adjusting a cufflink with unconscious precision. "Miss Henshaw entered the library at 10:30, as I told you, sir. She seemed preoccupied. She was holding a note, as I mentioned, and I overheard her mutter something about settling matters. I thought little of it at the time. Guests often have their dramas, but now, and the other guests," Poirot pressed. "Where were they between 10 and 11? Grayson's brow furrowed as he recalled. Sir Reginald was in the ballroom, overseeing the music. Lady Eleanor was with him, though she stepped out briefly to speak with the housekeeper about the morning's arrangements. Master Charles, I believe, was in the gardens. He often takes a walk when he's troubled. Mrs. Fowler was in the drawing room, playing cards with Miss Carter. Dr. Walsh was in the conservatory, examining Sir Reginald's orchids. And Mr. Langston." He paused, his voice lowering. "He was seen near the library corridor shortly before the scream." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Mercy, Monsieur Grayson, your memory is a treasure. One more question, the cigarette case in the library with the initials CH, to whom does it belong?" Grayson's face remained impassive, but his eyes flickered. "I cannot say for certain, sir. Miss Henshaw did not smoke, to my knowledge. Master Charles does, though. He prefers cigars. It may be his, left carelessly, or someone else's." Poirot dismissed the butler with a nod, his mind turning over the new information. The cigarette case, the note, the guest's movements all were fragments of a larger picture. He returned to the dining room, where Hastings awaited, his expression eager. "Well, Poirot," Hastings asked, "any breakthroughs? Grayson's a reliable sort. Did he spill anything useful?" Poirot smiled faintly. "He has given us threads, Hastings, but the weave is not yet clear. Come, let us walk the grounds. The fresh air, it clarifies the mind." They stepped into the gardens, where the mist was lifting, revealing rose beds and neatly trimmed hedges. Poirot's eyes scanned the paths, noting the damp earth and the faint imprint of footsteps leading to a secluded arbor, its latticework overgrown with ivy. He paused, crouching to examine the ground. A cigarette stub, not a cigar, lay half buried in the dirt, its paper still dry despite the morning dew. "Curio," Poirot murmured. "Charles claims he smoked a cigar last night, yet here is a cigarette. Someone else was here, perhaps." Hastings frowned. "You think Charles is lying about his walk?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, rising. "Or perhaps he was not alone. The arbor, it is a place for secrets. Nécessite pas. We must learn. Who else sought its shelter?" As they returned to the house, Poirot's thoughts were a world of possibilities. The guests of Marston Hall, each with their own motives and secrets, were like pieces on a chessboard, their moves calculated yet vulnerable to exposure. Lady Eleanor's strained composure, Charles's volatile temper, Mrs. Fowler's venom, Dr. Walsh's reticence, Evelyn's grief-feach, was a note in a discordant symphony. And Langston, with his blood-stained glove, remained the most enigmatic of all. Poirot paused at the threshold of the house, his gaze lingering on the mist-shrouded oaks. "The guests of Marston Hall, Hastings," he said softly, "they are not what they seem. Each hides something of fear, a desire, a guilt. We must peel back the layers, one by one, until the truth stands revealed." As they re-entered the house, the distant sound of Inspector Japp's voice carried from the parlor, questioning Langston with his usual bluntness. Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet determination. The blood-stained glove was but the first clue, and the guests of Marston Hall, with their secrets and their silences, held the key to unraveling the mystery of Clara Henshaw's death. Chapter 4. The missing necklace. The morning mist had burned away, leaving Marston Hall bathed in the pale light of a late autumn sun. But the grandeur of the estate could not dispel the shadow of murder that hung over its inhabitants. Hercule Poirot, his mind a hive of ordered activity, stood in the grand foyer, his polished shoes gleaming against the marble floor as he prepared to continue his investigation. The death of Clara Henshaw, the blood on Victor Langston's glove, the cigarette stub in the arbor, and the elusive note mentioned by the butler Grayson were pieces of a puzzle that Poirot was determined to assemble. But it was the absence of Clara's sapphire necklace, a jewel of such brilliance that it had drawn every eye at the ball, that now occupied his thoughts. Its disappearance was no mere detail. It was, he suspected, the key to unlocking the motive. Behind the crime, Captain Hastings, ever the faithful companion, joined him, his face a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Poirot," he said, adjusting his tie as they stepped into the drawing room where Inspector Japp was coordinating with the local constabulary. "This missing necklace business is odd, don't you think? If Langston's our man, why didn't he take it and run? And if he didn't kill her, who didn't? Where's the blasted thing?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his mind at work. "Monsieur Hastings, you ask the right questions, but you seek the answers too quickly. The necklace, it is not merely a jewellet, is a symbol, a desire, perhaps a secret. Its absence tells us as much as its presence would. We must search, yes, but we must also listen. The truth, it hides in the silences between words." Inspector Japp, overhearing, gave a gruff chuckle as he approached, his notebook in hand. "You, and your silences, Poirot. I say, a murder's a murder, and a thief's a thief. That necklace is worth a fortune, stands to reason someone killed her for it. Langston's glove puts him at the scene, and I'm not convinced by his "I just found her" story. What do you make of it?" Poirot raised a finger, his expression serene but firm. "Inspector, the glove is a clue, but it is not the whole story. A thief who kills for a necklace does not leave it behind, nor does he linger to be discovered with blood on his hands. No, there is more here, something deeper. The necklace, it is a thread we must follow, but carefully." Japp shrugged, unconvinced but accustomed to Poirot's methods. "Right then. I've got men searching the house, every room, every cupboard. If that necklace is here, we'll find it. Meanwhile, I'm keeping Langston under watch. He's not going anywhere." Poirot nodded, his eyes drifting to the drawing room's tall windows, where the gardens beyond shimmered with dew. "A search is necessary, Inspector, but I, Hercule Poirot, will conduct my own. The necklace, it may be hidden in plain sight, or it may be gone, but its absence, it speaks of intention." Leaving Japp to his duties, Poirot beckoned Hastings to follow him back to the library, the scene of the crime. The room, now cordoned off by the police, was silent save for the faint creak of the floorboards under their feet. Clara's body had been removed, but the armchair remained, its velvet stained with the grim evidence of her fate. Poirot stood before it, his hands clasped behind his back, his green eyes scanning every detail with the precision of a jeweler, examining a gem. "Hastings," he said, his voice low, "consider the necklace. It was a sapphire, large, flawless, set in gold. A jewel of such value is not easily misplaced. Yet it was not on Mademoiselle Henshaw's body, nor in this room. Where, then, has it gone? Hastings frowned, his mind grappling with the question. Well, the killer must have taken it, surely. But if Langston didn't do it, and I'm not saying he didn't, then someone else slipped in, stabbed her, and made off with it before he arrived. Though how they got out without being seen. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. Precisement, mon ami. The timing, it is critical. Grayson tells us Clara entered the library at 10:30, agitated, with a note. The scream came at 11:15. In that time, someone met her, killed her, and took the necklace. Yet the library has only one entrance, and the windows were locked from within. A mystery, Nan. He moved to the side table, where the sherry glass and cigarette case still sat, untouched by the police at his insistence. He lifted the glass again, inhaling its contents. The bitter undertone he had noted the previous night was still there, faint but unmistakable. This glass, he said, it must be analyzed. There is something not natural. And the cigarette case with the initials CH, it may belong to Charles Marston, or it may be a deception. We must inquire. Hastings nodded, though his expression betrayed his confusion. But the necklace, Poirot, where do we start looking? The house is enormous, and if the killer hid it, it could be anywhere. Poirot's eyes gleamed. We begin, Hastings, with the people. The necklace is not merely a jewel. It is a motive, a temptation. Let us speak to those who were close to Clara, those who might have coveted what she wore. Their first stop was the morning room, where Lady Eleanor sat alone, her hands folded in her lap, her face pale but composed. She rose as they entered, her green eyes wary. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady despite the strain in her posture, "have you found anything? The necklace, perhaps?" Poirot bowed slightly, his manner courteous but probing. "Not yet, madame, but I am curious. The necklace, it was a gift to Mademoiselle Henshaw, was it not?" "From whom?" Lady Eleanor hesitated, her fingers tightening briefly. "From her late father, I believe. Clara spoke of it oftener, family heirloom, passed down through generations. She was very proud of it. And yet," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild, "it is gone. Did you notice, madame, anyone paying particular attention to it last night? A glance, a comment, perhaps?" Her eyes flickered, but she shook her head. "Everyone admired it, Monsieur Poirot. It was impossible. Not to Clara. She had a way of drawing attention." There was a note of bitterness in her voice, quickly masked. Poirot noted it, as he noted the faint tremor in her hands. "Merci, madame," he said, dismissing her gently, as they left the morning room. He murmured to Hastings, "Lady Eleanor, she knows more than she says. The necklace, it was not merely admired, was envied." Their next interview was with Miss Evelyn Carter, whom they found in the conservatory, sketching a cluster of orchids, with rapid, nervous strokes. Her bohemian air was subdued, her eyes still red from crying. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, setting down her pencil, "I can't believe Clara's gone. She was so full of life, so radiant. That necklace, it suited her perfectly." Poirot's gaze softened, but his questions were sharp. "Mademoiselle Carter, you danced with Mademoiselle Henshaw last night, did you not? Did she speak of the necklace, or of anyone who might have wished to possess it?" Evelyn shook her head, her curls bouncing slightly. "She didn't mention it directly, but she was distracted. She kept looking toward the library, as though expecting someone. I thought it was just her, way she loved to be mysterious, but now," her voice trailed off, and she wiped her eyes. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing her words. And Monsieur Langston, you saw him with her. Did he seem overly interested in the necklace? Evelyn frowned. He was charming, as always. He complimented her, of course, but I didn't notice anything unusual. Though his gloves, they, were so odd. Who wears gloves to a ball? Precisement, Poirot murmured, his thoughts turning to Langston's enigmatic presence. He thanked Evelyn and led Hastings back to the library, where he wished to examine the room once more as they entered. Poirot's eyes fell upon the bookcase where he had found the scrap of paper the previous night. He approached it, his fingers tracing the hidden catch, but the compartment remained empty. He turned to the windows, checking their locks again, confirming they had not been tampered with. The necklace, he said, almost to himself, it was taken, but not far. The killer had little time, and the house was full of guests. It is here, Hastings, somewhere close. They were interrupted by the arrival of Mr. Grayson, who approached with his usual deference. Monsieur Poirot, he said, I've just remembered something. Last night, before Miss Henshaw entered the library, I saw Mrs. Fowler lingering in the corridor nearby. She said she was fetching a book, but she seemed agitated. I thought you should know. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Mercy, Monsieur Grayson. Your observations, they are invaluable. Tell me, did you see anyone else near the library before the scream? Grayson shook his head. No, sir, only Mr. Langston, as I mentioned. But I did notice Miss Henshaw's shawl was missing when we found her. It was a fine silk thing, blue, to match the necklace. I assumed it fell somewhere, but it wasn't in the library. Poirot's moustache twitched. A shawl, you say? Most interesting. We shall look for it, Monsieur Grayson. It may yet lead us to the necklace. As the butler departed, Poirot turned to Hastings, his expression one of quiet intensity. The necklace, the shawl, the note, they are connected, Hastings. Someone in this house killed Clara Henshaw, and the necklace was their prizor, their diversion. We must search, yes, but we must also think. The little grey cells, they will guide us. He led Hastings to the corridor outside the library, where they examined the floor and walls for any sign of the shawl or the necklace. Finding nothing, Poirot paused, his gaze distant. The necklace, he said softly, it is not merely a jewel, it is a story, a motive, a secret, and we, mon ami, will uncover it. As they returned to the drawing room, where Japp's men continued their search, Poirot's mind was a whirl of possibilities. The guests, the clues, the missing necklace, all were threads in a tapestry of deceit, and Hercule Poirot, with his unerring instinct for truth, was determined to weave them together before the killer could unravel the fragile fabric of justice. Chapter 5. The alibi of Charles Marston. The afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows of Marston Hall, casting long slanting rays across the polished floors. Yet the warmth did little to dispel the chill of suspicion that lingered in the air. Hercule Poirot, his mind a labyrinth of ordered thoughts, stood in the grand hall, his small, precise figure a stark contrast to the towering portraits of Marston ancestors gazing down with stern disapproval. The murder of Clara Henshaw, the blood on Victor Langston's glove, the missing sapphire necklace, and the tantalizing fragments of a note and a cigarette stub had woven a complex web, and Poirot was determined to unravel it. His attention now turned to Charles Marston, the brooding heir whose volatile temper and evasive manner had piqued his curiosity. The young man's claim of a solitary walk in the gardens during the critical hour of the murder demanded scrutiny. And Poirot, with his unerring instinct for the truth, was resolved to test its veracity. Captain Hastings, ever at his side, adjusted his hat as they stepped into the gardens, where the air was crisp with the scent of damp earth and fading roses. "Poirot," he said, his voice tinged with impatience, "this Charles fellow is a queer one, isn't he? Storming out at breakfast, barely speaking to anyone. If he was really just taking a walk, why is he so jumpy? And that cigarette case in the library, could be his initials, couldn't it?" Poirot's green eyes gleamed as he adjusted his scarf against the autumn breeze. "Mon cher Hastings, you observe the surface, but we must dive deeper. The initials, yes, they may point to Charles, but they may also be a clever misdirection. His alibi, it is like a poorly tailored suit, it does not fit perfectly. We shall examine it, stitch by stitch, until we find the tear they made there." Way to the gardens, where the paths wound through manicured hedges and rose beds, now tinged with the first signs of autumn's decay. The arbor, where Poirot had found the cigarette stub the previous day, was their destination, a secluded latticework structure draped in ivy, hidden from the house's prying windows. Poirot paused at its entrance, his eyes scanning the ground. The cigarette stub was gone, likely swept away by a diligent gardener, but the memory of it lingered in his mind. "A cigarette, not a cigar," he murmured, recalling Charles's claim of smoking a cigar during his walk. The discrepancy, it is small, but it speaks loudly. Hastings frowned, kicking at a pebble. "You think he's lying then, but why? If he was in the gardens, he couldn't have been in the library stabbing Clara, could he?" Poirot's mustache twitched. "The gardens, they are vast, Hastings, but they are not far from the library. A man could move quickly, unseen especially. In the dark, let us retrace his steps, or what he claims were his steps." They followed the path Charles had described, a winding route that circled the rose garden and past a small fountain before looping back toward the house. The earth was soft from recent rain, and Poirot's sharp eyes noted the absence of clear footprints. "Curio," he said, crouching to examine the ground. "Charles claims he walked here last night, yet the path, it is pristine. A man of his build, smoking a cigar, would leave traces, nan. Mud on his shoes, perhaps, or ash." Hastings nodded, catching the drift. His shoes were clean at breakfast, weren't they? "I noticed that polished to a shine. Odd for someone trudging about in the dark." "Precisement," Poirot said, rising. "Either he did not walk as he claims, or he took great care to erase his traces. Both possibilities, they intrigued me." They returned to the arbor, where Poirot examined the bench within, its weathered wood offering no immediate clues. He ran his fingers along the edges, pausing at a faint scratch mark, barely visible. "Something was here," he said softly. "Something moved or dropped. The cigarette stub, perhaps, or another secret." Their investigation was interrupted by the arrival of Charles Marston himself, striding across the lawn, his dark eyes flashing with irritation. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice tight, "I hear you've been poking about the gardens, asking questions about me. If you've something to say it to my face." Poirot regarded him with a calm, almost paternal air. "Monsieur Marsden, I seek only the truth. You claim you were walking in these gardens last night, between 10 and 11, smoking a cigar. Yet I find no ash, no footprints, and a cigarette stub where a cigar should be. Perhaps you would care to explain." Charles's face reddened, his hands clenching at his sides. "I don't owe you an explanation," he snapped. I was here, alone, clearing my head. Clara Miss Henshaw was difficult. I needed space. Poirot's eyes narrowed, catching the hesitation in his words. Difficult, you say? In what way, monsieur? You were fond of her, were you not? I observed you at dinner, your eyes upon her, your manner. Intense. Charles's jaw tightened, and for a moment it seemed he might storm off again. But he took a breath, his voice lowering. Yes, I was fond of her. More than fond, I thought. I hoped she felt the same. But she was always playing games, flirting with Langston, with others. Last night we argued. Not here, earlier, in the drawing room. I went for a walk to cool off. That's all. Poirot tilted his head, his expression unreadable. An argument, you say? And what was the nature of this disagreement? Charles hesitated, his eyes darting to the side. She was reckless, showing off that necklace, drawing attention. I told her it wasn't safe, that someone might try to take it. She laughed at me, called me jealous. I left her and came out here, and you saw no one else. Poirot pressed. No one who might have followed her to the library. Charles shook his head, his expression darkening. No, I was alone. I swear it. Poirot nodded, his face betraying nothing. Mercy, Monsieur Marston. Your candor, it is appreciated. But tell me, the cigarette case in the library, with the initials CH, is it yours? Charles's eyes widened, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. No, it's not mine. I use cigars, not cigarettes. If it's Clara's, I wouldn't. No, she didn't smoke, as far as I saw. Poirot dismissed him with a polite nod, watching as Charles retreated toward the house, his shoulders hunched. He is troubled, Hastings, Poirot said softly. His story, it has holes, but his emotion, it is genuine. He loved her, perhaps, but love, it can lead to jealousy, and jealousy to violence. Hastings rubbed his chin. You think he did it, then? Argued with her, followed her to the library, and, well, you know. Poirot shook his head. Nan. Hastings, I think nothing yet. I observe, I question, I listen. Charles Marston's alibi, it is weak, but that does not make him a murderer. We must look further. They returned to the house, where Inspector Japp was overseeing the search for the missing necklace. He greeted them with a grimace. Nothing yet, Poirot, he said, wiping his brow. We've turned the place upside down, bedrooms, parlors, even the attics. That necklace is either well hidden or long gone. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Patience, Inspector. The necklace, it is close, I feel it. But we must also consider the shawl that Monsieur Grayson mentioned. A blue silk shawl, to match the necklace. It, too, is missing. Perhaps it holds a clue. Japp raised an eyebrow. A shawl, you think the killer wrapped a necklace in it? And stashed it somewhere? Perhaps, Poirot said, his tone enigmatic. Or perhaps it was taken to conceal something else's stain, a mark, a secret. We must find it. He requested Grayson's assistance once more, meeting the butler in the servants' hall. Monsieur Grayson, Poirot said, the shawl. Of Mademoiselle Henshaw, describe it to me, if you please. Grayson's face remained impassive, but his eyes were sharp. It was a fine silk shawl, sir, deep blue, with delicate embroidery along the edges. She wore it over her shoulders during the early part of the evening, but it was gone when we found her. And you saw no one with it afterward? Poirot asked. Grayson shook his head. No, sir. But I did see Miss Carter in the corridor near the library, shortly after 10. She seemed distracted, carrying a bundle of some sort. I thought it was her sketching materials, but now Poirot's moustache twitched. Most interesting. Mercy, Monsieur Grayson. As they left the servants' hall, Hastings looked puzzled. Evelyn Carter. You don't think she's involved, do you? She seemed genuinely upset about Clara. Everyone is upset, Hastings, Poirot said, his voice low. But grief, it can be a mask. We must question Mademoiselle Carter again. And we must find that shawl. It, like Charles Marston's alibi, may hold the key to the truth. They made their way to the conservatory, where Evelyn was once again sketching, her pencil moving with a feverish intensity. Poirot observed her. For a moment, noting the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes darted toward the door. Mademoiselle Carter, he said, his voice gentle but firm. A word, if you please. Last night, you were seen near the library, carrying a bundle. Might this have been Mademoiselle Henshaw's shawl? Evelyn's pencil froze, her face pulling. A bundle. I was carrying my sketchbook, that's all. I often wander at night, looking for inspiration. I didn't see Clara's shawl, I swear. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. Of course, mademoiselle. But if you remember anything, you will tell me. We. As they left the conservatory, Poirot's mind was a whirl of possibilities. Charles Marston's alibi was fragile, Evelyn Carter's bundle suspicious, and the missing shawl and necklace remained elusive. The guests of Marston Hall were a gallery of secrets, and Poirot, with his relentless pursuit of order, was determined to uncover the truth hidden within their tangled lies. Chapter 6. The Doctor's Secret. The late afternoon light filtered through the leaded windows of Marston Hall, casting intricate patterns across the polished oak floors. But the beauty of the estate was overshadowed by the persistent unease that clung to its inhabitants. Hercule Poirot, his mind a mosaic of clues and contradictions, moved with quiet purpose through the corridors, his polished shoes whispering against the wood. The murder of Clara Henshaw, the blood-stained glove of Victor Langston, the missing sapphire necklace, and the fragile alibi of Charles Marston had woven a tapestry of suspicion, each thread demanding careful scrutiny. Now, Poirot's attention turned to Dr. Henry Walsh, the reserved physician whose quiet demeanor and scholarly air concealed, he suspected, a secret as significant as any in this tangled affair. Captain Hastings, trailing behind, adjusted his cufflinks with a restless energy, his face a mixture of curiosity and frustration. Poirot, he said, his voice hushed as they approached the conservatory where Dr. Walsh was known to linger. This Walsh fellow seems the least likely suspect, don't you think? Always so calm, so professional. But you've got that look in your eye, the one that says you've sniffed out something. Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing at the corners of his lips. Monsieur Hastings, the calmest waters often hide the deepest currents. Dr. Walsh, he is a man of science, precise, methodically yet his reticence. It speaks of something unspoken. We shall see what lies beneath his composure. The conservatory was a glass-walled haven, filled with the lush greenery of exotic plants and the delicate perfume of orchids. Dr. Walsh stood at a wooden table, his spectacles glinting as he examined a rare specimen, his fingers deftly adjusting a magnifying glass. His grey hair was neatly combed, his tweed jacket immaculate, but Poirot noted the slight tension in his posture, as though he sensed their approach. Dr. Walsh, Poirot said, his voice smooth and courteous. A moment of your time, If you please, the orchids, they are fascinating, Nan. But I am here to discuss a matter less botanical. Walsh looked up, his pale blue eyes wary behind his spectacles. Monsieur Poirot, he said, setting down the magnifying glass with deliberate care. I expected you might wish to speak with me. This dreadful business with Miss Henshaw. I've told Inspector Japp all I know, but I'm happy to assist. Poirot inclined his head, his gaze never leaving Walsh's face. Mercy, Doctor, your cooperation, it is appreciated. Let us begin with last night. You were in this conservatory, I understand, examining Sir Reginald's orchids between 10 and 11. A curious choice, perhaps, when the ball was in full swing. Walsh's lips tightened briefly, but his voice remained steady. I'm not much for dancing, Monsieur Poirot. Sir Reginald's collection is remarkable, and I find plants more predictable than people. I was here, alone, until I heard the scream. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. Alone, you say? And yet, the conservatory, it is not far from the library. Did you see or hear anything unusual before the scream? A footstep, perhaps, or a voice? Walsh adjusted his spectacles, a gesture Poirot noted as a sign of discomfort. Nothing specific, he said. The music from the ballroom carried faintly, but I was focused on my work. I only realized something was wrong when the scream came. Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly, catching the faint hesitation in Walsh's tone. And Mademoiselle Henshaw, Doctor, you treated her, did you not? For nerves, I believe. What can you tell me of her state of mind? Walsh hesitated, his fingers brushing the edge of the table. She consulted me a few weeks ago. Yes. She was anxious, prone to restlessness. I prescribed a mild sedative, nothing more. She seemed a spirited young woman, but I sensed she carried some burden, a secret. Perhaps Poirot's moustache twitched. A secret, you say? Did she confide in you, Doctor, or did your professional instincts lead you to this conclusion? Walsh's face colored slightly. My instincts, Monsieur Poirot. She was guarded, but her manner suggested unease. I didn't press her. It's not my place to pry into patients' lives. Naturellement, Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. And yet, Doctor, you are a man of learning, with interests beyond medicine. I am told you have studied archaeology, particularly antique weapons. The dagger that killed Mademoiselle Henshaw is from Sir Reginald's collection. A fine piece, perhaps one you recognized. Walsh's eyes widened, a flicker of alarm crossing his face before he masked it. I may have seen it before, he admitted. Sir Reginald showed me his collection some months ago. The dagger is Persian, I believe, from the 17th century, but I assure you I had nothing to do with its use. Poirot nodded, his gaze piercing. Of course, Doctor, mature knowledge. It interests me. A man who understands such weapons would know their weight, their balance, perhaps even how to wield one with precision. Walsh's hands clenched briefly, but he forced a smile. You're reaching, Monsieur Poirot. I'm a physician, not a murderer. My interest in antiquities is academic, nothing more. Poirot bowed slightly, dismissing the topic with a wave of his hand. Mercy, Doctor. Your candor is noted. One final question. The necklace of Mademoiselle Henshaw, did you notice it last night? Did it catch your scholarly eye? Walsh shook his head, his expression firm. I noticed it, of course, who wouldn't? But I had no particular interest in it. Jewels are not my field. As Poirot and Hastings left the conservatory, Hastings let out a low whistle. He's hiding something, Poirot, isn't he? That business about the dagger, he looked rattled when you brought it up. Lips curved into a faint smile. We, Hastings, Dr. Walsh, he is like a book with a locked cover. He knows more than he says, but whether it is about the dagger, the necklace, or Mademoiselle Henshaw herself, we must discover. Their next stop was the library, where Poirot wished to re-examine the scene in light of Walsh's revelations. The room was as they had left it, the armchair still bearing the grim stain of Clara's blood, the sherry glass and cigarette case untouched under Japp's orders. Poirot approached the fireplace, where the twin to the murder weapon hung in its display. He examined it closely, noting its weight and balance, confirming Walsh's description of its Persian origin. A scholar's knowledge, he murmured, or a killer's. Hastings, pacing nearby, gestured to the cigarette case. What about this, Poirot? If it's not Charles's, and not Clara's, whose is it? Could it be Walsh's? Poirot shook his head. Nan, Hastings, Dr. Walsh does not strike me as a man who smokes, and the initials CH do not fit. But it is a clue, perhaps left, to mislead. We must ask the butler, Grayson, if he recalls seeing such a case in Walsh's possession. They summoned Grayson, who appeared promptly, his face a mask of professional calm. Monsieur Poirot, he said, how may I assist you? The cigarette case, Monsieur Grayson, Poirot said, holding it up. You said it might belong to Master Charles, but have you ever seen it in the possession of Dr. Walsh? Grayson's brow furrowed as he examined the case. No, sir, Dr. Walsh does not smoke, to my knowledge. The case is unfamiliar, though the initials suggest Miss Henshaw or Master Charles. I cannot be certain. Poirot nodded, dismissing him. Mercy, your memory, it is a treasure, as always. As Grayson departed, Poirot turned to the sherry glass, lifting it once more to his nose. The bitter undertone remained, a faint but persistent. Anomaly, this glass, Hastings, he said. It must be tested. If Mademoiselle Henshaw was sedated, perhaps by the good doctor's prescription, it could explain the absence of struggle. But if the sedative was stronger, Hastings's eyes widened. You think Walsh drugged her to make the murder easier? Poirot raised a hand. I think nothing yet, mon ami. I observe, I question. Dr. Walsh's secret. It may be innocent to scholarly interest, a private fear, or it may be darker. We must watch him. They left the library, Poirot's mind a whirl of possibilities. He requested a meeting with Inspector Japp, who was in the parlour, reviewing notes with a constable. Poirot, Japp said, looking up. Any luck with your poking about? My men are still hunting for that necklace and shawl. Nothing yet. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Inspector, I suggest you examine Dr. Walsh's belongings, discreetly. His knowledge of the dagger, it is intriguing, and the sherry glass in the library, have it analysed for any unusual substances. Japp raised an eyebrow but nodded. Right, I'll get on it. But I'm still betting on Langston. That glove doesn't lie. Poirot smiled faintly. The glove, it speaks, but it does not tell the whole truth. Dr. Walsh, he has a secret, and I, Hercule Poirot, will uncover it. As they stepped into the corridor, the distant sound of Evelyn Carter's sketching pencil echoed from the conservatory, a reminder of the tangled lives within Marston Hall. The doctor's secret, like the missing necklace and the fragile alibis of the other guests, was a piece of the puzzle, and Poirot, with his relentless pursuit of order, was determined to fit it into place before the killer could slip further into the shadows. Chapter 7. Lady Eleanor's confession. The late afternoon at Marston Hall carried a deceptive calm. The golden light filtering through the tall windows, softening the edges of the grand estate's sombre atmosphere. Yet, beneath the polished veneer of its oak-panelled corridors and manicured gardens, a current of tension pulsed, as if the very walls held their breath, awaiting the unravelling of Clara Henshaw's murder. Hercule Poirot, his mind a crucible of clues and contradictions, moved. With his characteristic precision, his polished shoes silent on the Persian rugs, the blood on Victor Langston's glove, the missing sapphire necklace, Charles Marston's dubious alibi, the cigarette stub in the arbour, and Dr. Walsh's guarded knowledge of antique daggers had each added layers to the mystery. Now, Poirot's focus shifted to Lady Eleanor Marston, whose poised exterior belied a subtle strain that had not escaped his keen observation. Captain Hastings, ever loyal, walked beside him, his brow furrowed with the weight of their findings. "Poirot," he said, his voice low as they approached the drawing room where Lady Eleanor had requested a private audience. "There's something about Lady Eleanor that doesn't quite add up. She's so composed, but at breakfast, I saw her hands tremble when Charles stormed out. Do you think she knows more than she's letting on?" Poirot's green eyes gleamed, his moustache twitching with a hint of satisfaction. "Monsieur Hastings, you begin to see the shadows beneath the surface. Lady Eleanor, she is like a fine porcelain vase, beautiful, but perhaps with a crack hidden from view. Her request to speak with me alone, it is significant. We shall listen, and we shall observe." The drawing room was a sanctuary of elegance, its damask wallpaper and velvet drapes absorbing the fading light, creating an intimate cocoon. Lady Eleanor stood by the fireplace, her auburn hair catching the glow of the flames, her hands clasped tightly before her. Her green silk gown was impeccable, yet her eyes, when they met Poirot's, held a flicker of vulnerability that contrasted sharply with her usual composure. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady but soft, "thank you for coming. I felt it necessary to speak with you privately. This tragedy with Miss Henshaw has shaken us all, and I fear there are things you must know." Poirot bowed slightly, his manner courteous but alert. "Madame, I am at your service. You have something to confide. We speak freely, for the truth, it is the only path to justice." Lady Eleanor gestured to a pair of armchairs by the hearth, inviting Poirot and Hastings to sit. She remained standing, her fingers twisting a delicate lace handkerchief. "I hardly know where to begin," she said, her voice faltering for the first time. "Clara Henshaw, she was not what she seemed. She was charming, yes, but beneath that charm was a calculating mind. She knew things, secrets that could ruin people." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his interest piqued. "Secrets, madame? And what secrets did Mademoiselle Henshaw know about you?" Lady Eleanor's lips parted, then closed, as though the words were a weight too heavy to lift. She took a breath, her gaze dropping to the fire. "Years ago, when I was young and foolish, I had an indiscretion. An affair, brief but reckless, with a man who promised much and delivered nothing. It was a mistake, long buried, or so I thought. Clara discovered it how, I don't know. She began to use it against me." Poirot leaned forward, his hands resting on his knees, his expression one of quiet intensity. "She blackmailed you, madame. What did she demand?" Lady Eleanor's eyes met his, filled with a mixture of shame and defiance. "Money, at first. Small sums, easily explained. But then she wanted more. Introductions, invitations to our circle, influence. She threatened to tell my husband, to expose me to society. I paid her, Monsieur Poirot, to keep her silent, but I swear to you, I did not kill her. Hastings, unable to contain himself, leaned forward. Good Lord, Lady Eleanor, blackmail. That's a motive, if ever I heard one. Did you see her last night, before the murder? Lady Eleanor shook her head, her hands tightening on the handkerchief. No, I did not. I was in the ballroom most of the evening, with Reginald. I stepped out briefly to speak with the housekeeper, as Grayson may have told you, but I did not go near the library. When I heard the scream, her voice broke and she turned away, her shoulders trembling. Poirot's voice was gentle but firm. Madame, your candor, it is appreciated. But tell me, this indiscretion, did anyone else know of it? Your son, perhaps, or another guest? She hesitated, her eyes darting to the side. Charles, he may have suspected. He's always been protective, perhaps too much so. But I never told him, and I don't believe Clara did. As for the others, I can't say. Clara was clever, she knew how to ferret out secrets. If she was blackmailing me, she may have been doing the same to others. Poirot's mustache twitched, his mind cataloguing this new revelation. And the necklace, Madame. You said it was a family heirloom. Did Clara ever speak of it in connection with her demands? Lady Eleanor's face paled slightly. She mentioned it once, in passing. She said it was her security, her insurance. Should anything happen to her? I thought she was being dramatic, but now... Her voice trailed off, and she looked away, her fingers crushing the handkerchief. Poirot rose, his expression unreadable. Mercy, Madame, your confession, it sheds light on the shadows. One final question. Your jewelry, may I see it? A brooch, perhaps, or a ring that you wore last night? Lady Eleanor frowned, puzzled, but nodded. Of course, Monsieur Poirot, my jewelry is in my dressing room. I'll have it brought to you. As she left to summon a maid, Hastings turned to Poirot, his eyes wide. Blackmail Poirot. That's a game-changer. If Clara was squeezing Lady Eleanor, who else was she targeting? And that bit about the necklace being her insurance, do you think she hid something in it? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Possibly, Hastings. The necklace, it is more than a jewellet, is a key, perhaps, to Clara's secrets. Lady Eleanor's confession, it confirms that Clara was a woman of cunning. We must see this brooch, for I suspect a connection. The maid arrived shortly, carrying a velvet-lined box containing Lady Eleanor's jewelry. Among the pieces was a sapphire brooch, its deep blue stone strikingly similar to the hue of Clara's missing necklace. Poirot examined it closely, noting the gold setting and the fine craftsmanship. Madame, he said, as Lady Eleanor returned, this brooch, it is exquisite. A family piece, perhaps. She nodded, her expression guarded. Yes, it's been in my family for generations. Why do you ask? Poirot smiled faintly, handing the brooch back. A mere curiosity, Madame. The similarity to Mademoiselle Henshaw's necklace, it is striking. As they left the drawing room, Poirot's mind was a whirl of possibilities. He requested a moment with Mr. Grayson, who appeared promptly, his demeanor as impeccable as ever. Monsieur Grayson, Poirot said, you mentioned seeing Mrs. Fowler near the library last night. Did you also see Lady Eleanor anywhere near that corridor? Grayson's eyes flickered with thought. Not near the library, sir. Lady Eleanor was in the ballroom until she spoke with the housekeeper around 10:15. I saw her return shortly after, and she remained there until the scream. Poirot nodded, dismissing him. Mercy, your precision. It is a gift. Outside, in the corridor, Hastings was practically bouncing with excitement. Poirot, that brooch. Do you think it's connected to the necklace and Lady Eleanor's story blackmail? It gives her a motive, but she says she was in the ballroom. Do you believe her? Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. Her confession, it is truthful, but not complete. She fears exposure, yes, but she also protects someone, perhaps her son. The brooch, it is a clue, Hastings. Its similarity to the necklace suggests a link, perhaps in craftsmanship or origin. We must learn more about Clara's insurance. They made their way to the library, where Poirot wished to re-examine the scene in light of Lady Eleanor's revelations. The room was unchanged, the armchair still stained, the sherry glass and cigarette case untouched. Poirot paused by the bookcase, his fingers brushing the hidden compartment where he had found the scrap of paper. The note, he murmured. It said, at 11, library. Clara was meeting someone, and that someone, perhaps, was her blackmail victim or her killer. Hastings rubbed his chin. If Lady Eleanor was being blackmailed, maybe Charles found out and confronted. Clara, or maybe someone else, Mrs. Fowler, even Walsh was in the same boat. Poirot nodded, his eyes distant. Persistent Clara Henshaw, she was a spider, weaving a web of secrets. But spiders, they can be crushed. We must find the shawl, the necklace, and the truth behind Lady Eleanor's confession. As they left the library, the distant sound of Inspector Japp's voice carried from the parlour, where he was questioning the staff. Poirot's mind was a kaleidoscope of clues. Lady Eleanor's confession, the sapphire brooch, the missing shawl, and the ever-present shadow of Victor Langston's glove. The guests of Marston Hall were a gallery of hidden truths, and Poirot, with his relentless pursuit of order, was determined to uncover the one that would lead him to Clara's killer. Chapter 8. The note and the arbor. The twilight at Marston Hall draped the estate in a soft, violet hush, the gardens beyond the windows fading into shadow as the day surrendered to evening. Hercule Poirot, his mind a symphony of precision, stood in the grand hall, his polished shoes catching the last glimmers of light from the chandeliers above. The murder of Clara Henshaw, with its web of clues, the blood on Victor Langston's glove, the missing sapphire necklace, Charles Marston's fragile alibi, Dr. Walsh's guarded knowledge, and Lady Eleanor's confession of blackmail had deepened the mystery, each revelation adding a new layer to the puzzle. Now, Poirot's focus turned to the tantalizing scrap of paper found in the library's hidden compartment. Its cryptic words, at 11. Library hinting at a clandestine meeting that had ended in death. The arbor, where a cigarette stub had contradicted Charles's claim of a cigar, beckoned as a place of secrets, and Poirot was determined to uncover its truths. Captain Hastings, ever at his side, adjusted his coat against the evening chill as they stepped into the gardens, his face a mixture of eagerness and unease. Poirot, he said, his voice low to avoid the ears of any lingering staff. That note you found, it's got to be the key, hasn't it? Clara was meeting someone in the library, and that someone killed her. And the arbor, do you think Charles was lying about being alone, or was someone else there? Poirot's green eyes gleamed in the fading light, his mustache twitching with a spark of anticipation. Mon cher Hastings, the note, it is like a whisper from the grave, telling us of Clara's intentions. The arbor, it is a stage where secrets were played out. We must return there, for it holds more than a cigarette stubber holds the truth of who was with whom and why. The gardens were silent, save for the rustle of leaves underfoot, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and late-blooming roses. The arbor, a lattice-work structure cloaked in ivy, stood at the edge of the rose garden, its seclusion making it an ideal place for private encounters. Poirot approached it with deliberate steps, his eyes scanning the ground for any new traces. The cigarette stub was gone, likely cleared by a gardener, but Poirot's memory of it was vivid, small, defiant clue that challenged Charles Marston's story. He knelt by the bench within the arbor, his fingers brushing the weathered wood. "Hastings," he said, his voice soft but commanding, "observe the bench. The scratch mark we noted before it is not random. Something was placed here, or dropped, with force." His keen eyes caught a glint beneath the bench, and he reached down, retrieving a torn piece of paper, its edges frayed. The handwriting was delicate, unmistakably feminine, and it read, "Meet me at 11. Library. Urgent." Poirot held the fragment up to the fading light, his expression one of quiet triumph. "Voila, Hastings. The note, or part of it. It matches. The scrap from the library. Clara wrote this, I am certain. She summoned someone to the library, and that someone, perhaps, was her killer." Hastings's eyes widened, his breath catching. "Good Lord, Poirot. That's her handwriting. All right, I saw it on a dance card last night. But who was it for? Charles Langston. Someone else?" Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "That mon ami is the question. The note, it is a summons, but to whom we must learn more. The arbor, it was a meeting place before the library, I suspect. Let us search further." They examined the surrounding area, Poirot's meticulous gaze noting every detail, the angle of the ivy, the faint scuff marks in the dirt, the absence of further debris. Near the base of a rosebush, half hidden by leaves, he found a small, silver hairpin, its design simple but elegant. "Curio," he murmured, slipping it into his pocket. "This is not Clara's. Her hair was adorned with pearls last night. Another woman, perhaps." Hastings rubbed his chin, his mind racing. "Evelyn Carter. She's got those loose curls. And she was seen near the library with a bundle. Or maybe Mrs. Fowler, she's got a sharp enough temper to be sneaking about." Poirot nodded, his thoughts elsewhere. "Possibly, Hastings. But we must not leap to conclusions. The hairpin, it is a clue, but it requires context. Let us return to the house and question Monsieur Langston again. His presence in the library. It is too convenient, and his story, it must be tested." They found Victor Langston in the parlor, where Inspector Japp was concluding another round of questioning. Langston sat with an air of studied calm, his blonde hair swept back, his new gloves clean and white replacing the blood-stained pair. Japp, looking frustrated, nodded to Poirot as they entered. "Poirot," he said, "this chop's sticking." To his story, found the body, touched the dagger, got blood on his glove, but I'm not buying it. No sign of that necklace yet, either. Poirot inclined his head, his gaze fixed on Langston. "Monsieur Langston," he said, his voice smooth, but probing, "you have told us you entered the library seeking quiet, only to find Mademoiselle Henshaw dead. But tell me, did she speak to you earlier, perhaps hinting at a meeting? A note, perhaps, or a promise of a surprise?" Langston's eyes flickered, but his smile remained. "She was flirtatious, Monsieur Poirot, as you saw. During our dance, She mentioned a surprise she had planned, something about the library. I thought it was a game, a bit of intrigue to liven the evening. When I went to the library, I expected, well, not this. Poirot's eyes narrowed, catching the slight falter in Langston's voice. And this surprise, Monsieur, it involved the necklace, perhaps. You admired it, did you not? Langston shrugged, his composure intact. Who wouldn't? It was stunning. But I didn't go there for jewels, if that's what you're implying. I found her dead, and that's the truth. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. Mercy, monsieur. Your candor, it is noted. But the note we found, it suggests Mademoiselle Henshaw expected someone at 11. If not you, then who? Langston's face tightened, but he shook his head. I don't know. She was a woman of secrets, Monsieur Poirot. Perhaps she had enemies I didn't know about. As Japp escorted Langston back to his room, Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice low. He knows more, Hastings. His story, it is polished, but there is a crack. The surprise, it was no game, it was a trap. Perhaps for him, perhaps for another. They returned to the arbor, Poirot's mind a whirl of possibilities. The note, the hairpin, the cigarette stubble, pointed to a meeting, a confrontation, before the murder. He requested a meeting with Miss Evelyn Carter, whose presence near the library and nervous demeanor made her a figure of interest. They found her in the morning room, sketching with a distracted air, her auburn curls falling loosely about her shoulders. Mademoiselle Carter, Poirot said, holding up the hairpin. This was found in the arbor. Is it yours? Evelyn's. Eyes widened, her hand instinctively touching her hair. I was in the gardens yesterday, sketching. I lose hairpins all the time. But I wasn't in the arbor last night, I swear. Poirot's gaze was piercing but gentle. And the note, mademoiselle. Did Mademoiselle Henshaw send you a message, perhaps asking you to meet her? Evelyn shook her head, her voice trembling. No, nothing like that. Clara and I were friendly, but she didn't confide in me. I saw her go to the library, looking agitated, but I didn't follow. Poirot nodded, dismissing her with a polite smile. Mercy, mademoiselle. If you remember anything, you will tell me. We. As they left the morning room, Hastings was practically buzzing with excitement. That hairpin, Poirot, it's hers, isn't it? And if she was in the arbor, she might have met Clara before the library. Could she be lying? Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. Possibly, Hastings. But the note, it was not for Evelyn, I think. Its urgency suggests a deeper connection, a lover, a rival, a victim of Clara's schemes. We must find the shawl, the necklace, and the recipient of this note. They returned to the library, where Poirot examined the hidden compartment once more, finding no further clues. The note's words, meet me at 11, library, urgent, echoed in his mind, a summons to a fatal meeting. The arbor, with its hairpin and cigarette stub, was a prelude. A place where secrets had been whispered before death intervened. As the evening deepened, the distant sound of a clock chiming reminded Poirot of the fleeting time. The note and the arbor were threads in a tapestry of deceit, and he, with his relentless pursuit of order, was determined to trace them to their source. The guests of Marston Hall, with their hidden truths and tangled motives, were drawing closer to exposure, and Hercule Poirot would not rest until the killer's shadow was brought into the light. Chapter 9. The hidden compartment. The evening at Marston Hall had settled into a hushed stillness, the kind that follows a storm, where every sound a creaking floorboard, a distant footsteps, seemed laden with portent. Hercule Poirot, his mind, a crucible of order amid the chaos of murder, stood in the grand library, its shelves of leather-bound tomes looming like silent witnesses to Clara Henshaw's death. The blood on Victor Langston's glove, the missing sapphire necklace, Charles Marston's questionable alibi, Dr. Walsh's guarded expertise, Lady Eleanor's confession of blackmail, and the note found in the arbour were threads in a tapestry of deceit, and Poirot was determined to weave them into a coherent pattern. The discovery of the note's fragment, "Meet me at 11. Library, urgent," had confirmed a fatal rendezvous. But it was the library itself, with its secrets hidden in plain sight, that now drew his focus. Captain Hastings, ever the eager shadow, stood by the library's heavy oak doors, his face a mixture of anticipation and unease. "Poirot," he said, his voice low to avoid disturbing the solemn air. "That note you found in the arbour, it's got to point to the killer, doesn't it? Clara was meeting someone, and they did her in. But we're no closer to finding that necklace or the shawl. Do you think they're still here, in the house?" Poirot's green eyes gleamed, his moustache twitching with the quiet thrill of the chase. "Mon cher Hastings, the library, it is the heart of this mystery. The note tells us Clara expected someone, but the room itself, it holds more than books. We must look again, for the smallest detail, it can unlock the greatest truth." The library was, as they had left it, the armchair stained with Clara's blood, a grim centerpiece. The sherry glass and cigarette case, still untouched under Inspector Japp's orders. The air was heavy with the scent of old paper and wax polish, tinged faintly with the metallic memory of blood. Poirot moved with deliberate precision, his small, neat figure a contrast to the room's grandeur. He approached the armchair, his eyes tracing its contours, noting the absence of any new marks since his last inspection. The dagger, now in Japp's custody, had been a precise instrument, its twin still hanging above the fireplace, a silent reminder of its deadly counterpart. Poirot's attention shifted to the side table, where the sherry glass stood, its contents still bearing that faint, bitter undertone he had noted earlier. "This glass, Hastings," he said, lifting it carefully to his nose, "it must be analyzed. The sedative, it may explain why Clara did not struggle. But for now, we seek something else, a hiding place, perhaps, where the necklace or shawl might lie." Hastings frowned, his hands in his pockets. "A hiding place. We've searched the room. Poirot, Japp's men turned it upside down. If the necklace was here, wouldn't we have found it by now?" Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "Nan, mon ami, the obvious, it is rarely the answer. The killer, they had little time, and the house was full of guests. To hide something valuable, they would choose a place clever, yet close. Let us examine the armchair once more." He knelt beside the chair, his fingers tracing the carved wooden frame, feeling for any irregularity. The velvet upholstery was soft but unyielding, the bloodstain a stark reminder of the violence it had witnessed. Poirot's hands moved methodically, pressing along the seams, until his fingers caught on a slight give in the armrest's underside. With a gentle twist, a small panel clicked open, revealing a hidden compartment no larger than a cigar box. Inside was a single item, a small brass key, its surface engraved with the initials CH. Poirot held the key up to the light, his eyes gleaming with triumph. Voila, Hastings. A hidden compartment, and within it, a key. CH Clara Henshaw, perhaps, or another with those initials. It is a clue of great significance. Hastings's eyes widened, his excitement palpable. Good Lord, Poirot, a key. Could it be for the necklace? Or something else Clara was hiding? Maybe a safe or a lockbox. Poirot nodded, slipping the key into his pocket. Precisely this key. It unlocks more than a physical object, unlocks a motive. Clara, she was a woman of secrets, and this key, it may lead us to them. They moved to the bookcase where Poirot had found the notes fragment, checking the hidden compartment again, but it remained empty. Poirot's mind was a whirl of possibilities, the key, the note, the hairpin in the arbor, all pointing to a network of secrets that Clara had woven. He turned to Hastings, his voice low but firm. We must find what this key opens, Hastings. A safe, a diary, a box, something Clara valued enough to hide. Their next step was to enlist Inspector Japp, who was in the parlor, coordinating the ongoing search for the necklace and shawl. Japp looked up as they entered, his face etched with frustration. Poirot, he said, tossing a notebook onto the table. We've searched every room, every wardrobe, nothing. That necklace and shawl have vanished into thin air. And Langston, still sticking to his story. What have you got? Poirot held up the key, its brass surface catching the lamplight. This, Inspector, was found in a hidden compartment in the library armchair. It bears the initials CH. I believe it belongs to something Mademoiselle Henshaw wished to protect as safe. Perhaps, or a diary. Japp's eyebrows shot up. A hidden compartment. You're a sly one, Poirot. Right, let's search her room again. If she had a safe or a lockbox, it's likely there. They proceeded to Clara's guest room, a spacious chamber adorned with floral wallpaper and a four-poster bed. Japp's men had already searched it, but Poirot's meticulous eye saw what they had missed. Beneath a writing desk, partially concealed by a folded rug, was a small, locked diary, its leather cover embossed with the initials CH. The key fit perfectly, and with a soft click. The diary opened. Poirot leafed through the pages, his expression one of quiet intensity. The entries were written in Clara's delicate hand, detailing her days at Marston Hall and beyond. One passage caught his eye. Mrs. F is bolder than I thought, taking what isn't hers. I have proof, but I must be careful. The necklace is my shield, but it draws too many eyes. Another entry, dated the day before her death, read, He knows too much. I must confront him tonight, or all is lost. Poirot closed the diary, his mind racing. Hastings, Inspector's diary. It confirms Clara's schemes. Mrs. Fowler. She was stealing, and Clara knew it. But this he, who is it? Charles, Langston, Walsh, or another? Japp scratched his head. Mrs. Fowler, that old bat's got a sharp tongue, but a thief. And this, he sounds like Clara was. Playing a dangerous game. We'll bring Fowler in for questioning. Poirot nodded, his thoughts elsewhere. The diary, it is a treasure, but it does not mention the shawl or the necklace's hiding place. We must search further, but first, let us speak to Mrs. Fowler. Her actions, they may illuminate the shadows. They found Mrs. Beatrice Fowler in the morning room, sipping tea with an air of defiance, her burgundy gown a vivid contrast to the room's muted tones. Her grey curls were pinned tightly, but her eyes were sharp, wary. Monsieur Poirot, she said, setting down her cup. I suppose you're here to accuse me of something, like everyone else in this wretched house. Poirot's smile was disarming, but his eyes were piercing. Madame Fowler, I accuse no one yet. But I have learned that Mademoiselle Henshaw suspected you of, shall we say, borrowing items from the Marston household. Is this true?" Mrs. Fowler's face flushed, her lips tightening. That girl was a meddler, sticking her nose where it didn't belong. Yes, I took a few trinket small things, hardly missed, but I didn't kill her for it. She was alive. When I last saw her, prancing about with that necklace, Poirot's gaze never wavered. "And when was that, madame? Before or after she entered the library?" Mrs. Fowler hesitated, her hands twisting in her lap. "Before. I saw her in the corridor, around 10. She was clutching a note, looking smug. I went to fetch a book, as I told Grayson, and then returned to the drawing room." Poirot nodded, filing away her words. "Merci, madame, your candour, it is noted." As they left the morning room, Hastings was buzzing with excitement. Poirot, she admitted to stealing. If Clara was threatening to expose her, that's a motive. And that he, in the diary, could it be Langston or Walsh? Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. Possibly Hastings. The hidden compartment, the key, the diary, they point to Clara's web of blackmail. But the shawl, the necklace, and the identity of he remain elusive. We must keep searching for the truth. It is close. As they returned to the library, the distant chime of the hall clock marked the passing hours. The hidden compartment had yielded its secret, but the puzzle was far from complete. Poirot, with his relentless pursuit of order, knew that the threads of Clara's schemes, her blackmail, her rendezvous, her death were drawing tighter, and he would not rest until they led him to the killer hiding among the guests of Marston Hall. Chapter 10. The widow's motive of night had descended upon Marston Hall with a velvet weight. Its grand rooms and corridors cloaked in shadows that seemed to whisper of secrets yet untold. Hercule Poirot, his mind a beacon of clarity amid the murk of suspicion, stood in the dimly lit library, the scene of Clara Henshaw's murder. The blood on Victor Langston's glove, the missing sapphire necklace, Charles Marston's dubious alibi, Dr. Walsh's guarded expertise, Lady Eleanor's confession of blackmail, the note in the arbour, and the key found in the hidden compartment of the armchair had woven a complex web of intrigue. The diary, unlocked by that very key, had revealed Clara's suspicions of Mrs. Beatrice Fowler's thievery and a mysterious he she planned to confront. Now Poirot's focus sharpened on Mrs. Fowler, the sharp-tongued widow whose admission of pilfering Marston heirlooms suggested a motive as potent as any in this tangled affair. Captain Hastings, ever at Poirot's side, shifted uneasily in the library's hush, his face etched with the restless energy of a man eager for answers. "Poirot," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mrs. Fowler's confession about stealing, good heavens, that's a bombshell. If Clara was on to her, threatening to expose her, that's reason enough too. Well, you know, do you think she's our killer?" Poirot's green eyes gleamed in the lamplight, his moustache twitching with a quiet intensity. "Mon cher Hastings, Mrs. Fowler's motive. It is like a flame, it burns brightly, but we must see if it casts light or merely smoke. She admits to theft, yes, but murder. That is a leap we must not make without evidence. Let us confront her and observe how she defends her secrets." They found Mrs. Beatrice Fowler in the drawing room, seated in a high-backed chair, her burgundy gown a stark contrast to the room's muted elegance. Her grey curls were pinned with a severity that matched her expression, her hands folded tightly in her lap as though guarding against intrusion. A single lamp cast harsh shadows across her face, accentuating the lines of defiance etched there. She looked up, as Poirot and Hastings entered, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice sharp as a blade, "I suppose you've come to harass me further about Clara Henshaw. I've told you what I know, eh? Took a few trinkets, nothing more. Surely you don't think me capable of murder?" Poirot bowed slightly, his manner courteous but unyielding. "Madame Fowler, I accuse no one yet, but the diary of Mademoiselle Henshaw, it speaks of your acquisitions. She had proof, she wrote, and intended to confront you. Such a threat, it could provoke a desperate act. None." Mrs. Fowler's face flushed, her hands trembling despite her efforts to remain composed. "That girl was a viper," she snapped, her voice low but venomous. "Always prying, always scheming. Yes, she caught me taking a silver candlestick from the dining room, a small thing, hardly worth noticing. She threatened to tell Sir Reginald, to ruin me. But I didn't kill her. I saw her in the corridor near the library, clutching that wretched note, looking like she was plotting something. I went to fetch a book, as I told Grayson, and then returned to the drawing room to play cards with Miss Carter." Poirot's eyes narrowed, catching the tremor in her voice. "And this confrontation, Madame, when did it occur? Before or after you saw her with the note?" Mrs. Fowler hesitated, her fingers twisting a ring on her hand, a sapphire ring. Poirot noted its hue eerily reminiscent of Clara's missing necklace. "Before," she said finally. "It was earlier in the evening, around 9. She cornered me in the hallway, all smiles and threats. I told her to keep quiet, and she laughed, saying she had bigger fish to fry. I didn't see her again until the scream." Poirot's mustache twitched, his mind cataloguing her words. "And the sapphire ring, Madame? It is striking. Nan, a recent acquisition, perhaps." Mrs. Fowler's hand froze, her eyes flashing with alarm. It's an old piece from my late husband. Nothing to do with Clara or her necklace." Her voice was firm, but Poirot detected a note of panic beneath it. "Not a relmung," he said, his tone deceptively mild. "But you will permit me to examine it." Reluctantly, she removed the ring and handed it to him. Poirot turned it in the lamplight, noting its fine craftsmanship and the deep blue stone. So similar to the necklace's description, he returned it. With a polite nod, his mind racing. "Merci, Madame. One final question. The shawl of Mademoiselle Henshaw, blue silk to match her necklace, did you see it after she entered the library?" Mrs. Fowler shook her head, her expression defiant. "No, I didn't. I told you, I was in the drawing room after fetching my book. Ask Miss Carter, she confirm it." Poirot dismissed her with a courteous bow, but his eyes were sharp as they left the drawing room. Hastings, barely containing his excitement, leaned in. "Poirot, that ring. It's too close to the necklace to be a coincidence, surely. And her story about the confrontation, it's shaky. She's got a motive as clear as day." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "Oui, Hastings, the ring, it is intriguing. But a motive, it is not proof. Mrs. Fowler, she is a thief, perhaps, but a murderer. We must verify her alibi with Mademoiselle Carter, and we must find that shawl." They sought out Miss Evelyn Carter, who was in the conservatory, her sketching abandoned in favor of pacing among the orchids. Her auburn curls were dishevelled, her eyes red-rimmed, as though she had been crying again. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice trembling, "this house feels like a prison. Have you found anything? The necklace, the killer." Poirot's gaze was gentle but probing. "Mademoiselle Carter, we make progress, but I require your assistance. Madame Fowler claims she was with you in the drawing room, playing cards, after 10 o'clock last night. Is this true?" Evelyn frowned, her hands twisting together. "Yes, I think so. We played a few hands of bridge, Mrs. Fowler, myself, and 2 other guests. She joined us after fetching a book from the library corridor, but she was distracted, kept looking at the door. I thought she was just upset about Clara." Poirot nodded, filing away the detail. "And the bundle you were seen carrying near the library, mademoiselle, was it indeed your sketchbook, or perhaps something else? The shawl of Mademoiselle Henshaw, perhaps?" Evelyn's face paled, her eyes wide. "My sketchbook, I swear. I didn't see her shawl. I was in the corridor, briefly, looking for a quiet place to sketch, but I didn't go into the library." Poirot's expression remained unreadable. "Merci, mademoiselle. Your candor, it is appreciated." As they left the conservatory, Hastings was practically vibrating with theories. "Poirot, Mrs. Fowler's alibi holds, but only just. And that ring, you think it's part of the necklace, broken apart? And Evelyn's bundle, could she be lying about the shawl?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Possibly, Hastings. The ring, it is too similar to ignore, but we must confirm its origin. As for Mademoiselle Carter, her nervousness, it suggests fear, but of what? We must search Mrs. Fowler's room, discreetly, for any trace of the shawl or necklace." With Japp's permission, they conducted a careful search of Mrs. Fowler's guest room, a task undertaken while she was occupied with tea in the drawing room. The room was orderly, its wardrobe filled with gowns in bold hues, but Poirot's keen eyes spotted a small locked box beneath the bed. Using a hairpin from his peculiar trick learned from past cases, he opened it, revealing a pawn ticket, dated 2 days before Clara's death, for a sapphire ring sold at a London shop. Poirot held up the ticket, his expression one of quiet triumph. "Voila, Hastings. Mrs. Fowler, she sold a sapphire ring, perhaps to cover her tracks. But is it connected to the necklace? We must visit this pawnbroker." Japp, joining them, examined the ticket with a grunt. "Good work, Poirot. I'll send a man to London to check this out. If that ring's part of the necklace, we've got her, but I'm still keeping an eye on Langston. That glove's too damning." Poirot nodded, his mind a whirl of possibilities. "The glove, it is a clue, Inspector, but the widow's motive, it burns brighter. The pawn ticket, the diary, the confrontation, they point to Mrs. Fowler, but the shawl and necklace remain elusive. We must find them, for they will lead us to the truth." As they left the room, the distant sound of the hall clock chimed, marking the relentless march of time. Mrs. Fowler's motive was clear, her actions suspicious, but the puzzle was far from complete. Poirot, with his unerring instinct for order, knew that the threads of Clara's death were tightening, and he would follow them to their source, no matter how deeply they were hidden within the secrets of Marston Hall. Chapter 11. The Final Gathering, the Grand Ballroom of Marston Hall. Once a stage 4 elegance and revelry, now stood sombre under the weight of murder, its chandeliers casting a muted glow over the gathered guests. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that precedes a storm, as Hercule Poirot prepared to unravel the mystery of Clara Henshaw's death. The blood on Victor Langston's glove, the missing sapphire necklace, Charles Marston's fragile alibi, Dr. Henry Walsh's guarded knowledge, Lady Eleanor's confession of blackmail, the note found in the arbour, the key in the hidden compartment, and Mrs. Beatrice Fowler's admitted thievery had woven a tapestry of deceit. each thread meticulously catalogued by Poirot's little grey cells. Now, as the evening deepened, he had summoned the guests to the ballroom for a final reckoning. Determined to expose the truth hidden among them, Captain Hastings stood at Poirot's side, his face a mixture of excitement and apprehension, his hands fidgeting with the brim of his hat. "Poirot," he whispered, as the guests filed in, their expressions ranging from wary to defiant. "This is it, isn't it? You've got it all figured out, the necklace, the note, the killer. I can see it in your eyes. But how do you do it? How do you piece it all together?" Poirot's green eyes gleamed, his mustache twitching with a quiet confidence. "Mon cher Hastings, it is the method of Hercule Poirot, the order, the symmetry, the little grey cells. Each clue, it is a note in a symphony, and now we shall play the final chord. Observe the guests, their faces, their silences, they will betray the guilty." The guests took their places in a semicircle of chairs arranged by the butler, Mr. Grayson, whose impeccable demeanour masked the strain of the past days. Sir Reginald Marston sat at the centre, his robust frame slumped slightly, his silver hair dishevelled, a man burdened by the violation of his home. Lady Eleanor, beside him, was a study in poise, her auburn hairs swept up, her green eyes fixed on Poirot with a mixture of hope and dread. Charles Marston, their son, leaned forward, his dark eyes burning with intensity, his hands clenched as though ready to spring. Mrs. Beatrice Fowler, in her bold burgundy gown, sat with a scowl, her grey curls pinned tightly, her defiance a shield. Against scrutiny, Dr. Henry Walsh, his spectacles glinting, maintained his reserved air, though his fingers twitched nervously. Miss Evelyn Carter, her auburn curls loose, clutched a handkerchief, her eyes red-rimmed with lingering grief. Victor Langston, under Inspector Japp's watchful eye, stood apart, his blonde hair immaculate, his new gloves pristine, his smile a mask of calm. Inspector Japp, stationed near the door with a constable, gave Poirot a nod, his face etched with the impatience of a man eager for resolution. "Right, Poirot," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "You've got the floor. Let's hear it. Who killed Clara Henshaw? And where's that blasted necklace?" Poirot stepped forward, his small figure commanding the room with an authority that belied his stature. He clasped his hands behind his back, his voice clear and measured, cutting through the tension like a blade. "Madame et messieurs," he began, "we are gathered to uncover the truth of a crime most heinous. Murder of Mademoiselle Clara Henshaw. A young woman, vibrant, cunning, was struck down in this house, her sapphire necklace stolen. A dagger from Sir Reginald's collection plunged into her heart. But the truth, it is like a glove, fits only one hand. Let us examine the clues, one by one, and see where they lead." He paced slowly, his eyes sweeping over the guests, noting their reactions, Lady Eleanor's tightened lips, Charles's clenched fists, Mrs. Fowler's scowl, Walsh's averted gaze, Evelyn's trembling hands, Langston's faint smile. First, the blood on Monsieur Langston's glove. A damning clue, n'est-ce pas? He claims he found Mademoiselle Henshaw dead, touched the dagger in shock, and stained his glove. Yet the blood, it was a single smear, precise, not the splatter of a hasty act. This, it troubled me. Langston shifted, his smile faltering. "I've told you, Monsieur Poirot, it was an accident. I meant no harm." Poirot raised a finger, silencing him. "Patience, monsieur. We shall return to you. Next, the note. Meet me at 11. Library. Urgent. Found in the arbour and the library's hidden compartment. Clara wrote it, summoning someone to a fatal rendezvous. But who? And the key, also marked CH, unlocked her diary, revealing her blackmail. She knew of Madame Fowler's thefts, of Lady Eleanor's past indiscretion, and of a mysterious he she planned to confront. Mrs. Fowler bristled, her voice sharp. I admitted to taking trinkets, Monsieur Poirot, but I didn't kill her. She was alive when I saw her last. Poirot nodded, his gaze steady. Oui, madame, and your alibi. It is confirmed by Mademoiselle Carter. But the pawn ticket in your room, for a sapphire ring sold days before the murder, it suggests a deeper involvement, perhaps with the necklace. Mrs. Fowler's face paled, but she said nothing, her hands gripping the arms of her chair. Poirot turned to Charles Marston, whose eyes burned with defiance. Monsieur Charles, your alibi, a walk in the gardens, smoking a cigar. Yet we found a cigarette stub in the arbor, and your shoes, they were clean, despite the muddy paths. You argued with Clara, over her flirtations, her refusal of your affections. Charles's voice was low, strained. I told you, I loved her. Yes, we argued, but I left her alive. I was in the gardens, alone. Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice remained firm. Perhaps, monsieur. But your love, it was a fire that could burn. We shall see. He turned to Dr. Walsh, whose spectacles glinted as he adjusted them nervously. Doctor, your knowledge of antique daggers, it was precise. You recognized the murder weapon, yet you claim no involvement. Your alibi, it holds, but your reticence, it speaks of a secret. Walsh's voice was steady, but his hands betrayed him. I'm a scholar, Monsieur Poirot, not a killer. I had no quarrel with Clara. Poirot nodded, moving on to Evelyn Carter. Mademoiselle Carter, your hairpin in the arbor, your bundle near the library, you were close to the scene, yet you claim innocence. Your grief, it is genuine, but grief can hide guilt. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. I didn't hurt her, Monsieur Poirot. I swear it. I was sketching, nothing more. Finally, Poirot faced Langston, his gaze piercing. Monsieur Langston, the blood on your glove, it was not from the dagger, I think. It was from the necklace, which you found and hid, hoping to profit. But you did not kill her, did you? Langston's composure cracked, his voice rising. I told you, I found her dead. I saw the necklace on the floor, yes, and I took it. Foolish, I know, but I didn't kill her. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. The necklace, it was found in Monsieur Langston's coat, thanks to Inspector Japp's diligence. But the true killer, they were cleverer. They used the library's hidden compartment, the note, the shawl, to weave a web of misdirection. He paused, letting the tension build, his eyes scanning the faces before him. The shawl, it was found this evening, hidden in a vase in the conservatory, stained with blood. And the diary, it named Madame Fowler as a thief, but also a he. Clara feared that he, it was not Charles, nor Walsh, nor Langston. It was a fiction, a distraction created by the killer to confuse us. Poirot's voice rose, commanding. The killer is among you, and the motive was not the necklace alone, but the silencing of Clara's blackmail. Madame Fowler, your thefts gave you motive, but your alibi holds. Lady Eleanor, your secret was a burden, but you were in the ballroom. Charles, your love was a fire, but you did not strike the blow. He turned, his eyes locking onto a figure in the semicircle. The truth, it lies in the details, the sherry glass with its sedative, the hairpin in the arbor, the the precise strike of the dagger. We shall reveal the killer in the final act. As the guests held their breath, Poirot's mind was a beacon of clarity, the threads of the mystery drawing together. The final gathering was not yet complete, but the stage was set, and Hercule Poirot was poised to unveil the truth that would shatter the shadows of Marston Hall. Chapter 12. The truth unveiled. The ballroom of Marston Hall, its chandeliers casting a soft, unwavering glow, held its breath as Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the gathered guests, his small figure commanding a presence that filled the vast space. The air was taut with expectation, the weight of Clara Henshaw's murder pressing against every heart. The blood on Victor Langston's glove, the missing sapphire necklace, Charles Marston's fragile alibi, Dr. Henry Walsh's guarded knowledge, Lady Eleanor's confession of blackmail, the note in the arbor, the key in the hidden compartment, Mrs. Beatrice Fowler's admitted thievery, and the blood-stained shawl found in the conservatory had all been laid bare in Poirot's meticulous recounting. Now, as the clock in the hall chimed the hour, Poirot prepared to unveil the final truth. His little grey cells having woven the disparate threads into a tapestry of irrefutable clarity, Captain Hastings, seated among the guests, leaned forward, his eyes wide with anticipation, his hands gripping the edge of his chair. Inspector Japp, standing near the door with a constable, watched Poirot with a mixture of skepticism and respect, his notebook poised but untouched, as though he sensed the moment required no further record. The guests are Reginald, Lady Eleanor, Charles, Mrs. Fowler, Dr. Walsh, Miss Evelyn Carter, and Victor Langston sat in a semicircle, their faces a gallery of emotions, fear, defiance, curiosity, and dread. Poirot clasped his hands behind his back, his voice clear and resonant, cutting through the silence like a bell. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, we have journeyed through a labyrinth of lies, motives, and secrets to arrive at this moment, the unveiling of the truth. Mademoiselle Clara Henshaw, a woman of charm and cunning, was murdered in the library of this house, her sapphire necklace stolen, a dagger from Sir Reginald's collection driven into her heart. But the clues, they have spoken, and the little grey cells of Hercule Poirot, they have listened. He paced slowly, his eyes sweeping over the guests, noting every flicker of expression, Lady Eleanor's tightened lips, Charles's clenched fists, Mrs. Fowler's scowl, Walsh's averted gaze, Evelyn's trembling hands, Langston's strained smile. Let us begin with the blood on Monsieur Langston's glove, a damning clue. He claimed he found Clara dead, touched the dagger in shock, and stained his glove. Yet the blood, it was a single smear, not the splatter of such an act. This troubled me, for it suggested the glove was stained not by accident, but by design. Langston shifted, his voice rising. I've told you, Monsieur Poirot, I found her dead. I took the necklace, yes, but I didn't kill her. Poirot raised a finger, silencing him. Patience, monsieur. Your theft, it was opportunistic, but not murderous. The necklace, found in your coat, confirms this. You saw it on the floor, took it and hid it, hoping to profit. But the blood on your glove, it was placed there, a clever misdirection by the true killer. A murmur rippled through the guests, but Poirot's voice cut through it. Next, the note, meet me at 11. Library, urgent, found in the arbor and the library's hidden compartment. Clara wrote it, summoning someone to a fatal rendezvous. The diary, unlocked by the key marked CH, revealed her blackmail. Lady Eleanor's past indiscretion, Madame Fowler's thefts, and a mysterious he she planned to confront. But this he, it was a deception, a shadow cast to confuse. Lady Eleanor's hand tightened on her handkerchief, but she remained silent. Poirot continued, his gaze steady. The shawl, blood-stained and hidden in the conservatory, was another clue. It was Clara's, worn to match her necklace, but discarded by the killer to conceal evidence. The sherry glass, with its trace of sedative, explained the absence of struggle. Clara was drugged, her defenses lowered, and the hairpin in the arbor, it pointed to a woman's presence before the murder. He turned to Charles Marsden, whose eyes burned with intensity. Monsieur Charles, your love for Clara was a fire, but your alibi, it was weak. The cigarette stub in the arbor, not a cigar, suggested another's presence. You argued with Clara, but you did not kill her. Your grief, it is genuine. Charles exhaled, his shoulders sagging. But Poirot's gaze moved on to Dr. Walsh. Doctor, your knowledge of daggers was precise, but your alibi holds. You hid no secret but scholarly interest. Walsh adjusted his spectacles, a faint relief. Crossing his face, Poirot then faced Lady Eleanor. Madame, your confession of blackmail gave you motive, but you were in the ballroom, your secret safe for now. Mrs. Fowler bristled, her voice sharp. What of me, Monsieur Poirot? You've harped on my thefts, but I was playing cards, as Miss Carter confirmed. Poirot's eyes locked onto her, his voice dropping to a quiet intensity. Madame Fowler, and it is you who wove this web of death. You admitted to stealing, but Clara's diary revealed she had proof you could not allow to surface. You met her in the library, as her note demanded, to silence her threats. You drugged her sherry with a sedative, stolen from Dr. Walsh's medical bag, ensuring she could not resist. You struck her with the dagger, precise and swift, and took the necklace to mask your motive as theft. But you returned, hearing Monsieur Langston approach, and smeared blood on his glove, planting the necklace in his coat to frame him. Mrs. Fowler's face drained of color, her hands trembling violently. You're mad, she cried, rising from her chair. I did no such thing. I was in the drawing room. Poirot's voice was unyielding. None, madame. Your alibi, it is thin. Mademoiselle Carter noted your distraction, your glances at the door. You slipped away, claiming to fetch a book, but instead you went to the library, the shawl stained. With blood, you hid in the conservatory, but it betrayed you. The pawn ticket for a sapphire ring, sold days before, was a desperate act to fund your escape, but it linked you to Clara's schemes. Evelyn Carter gasped, her handkerchief falling to the floor. Mrs. Fowler, but she was with me. Poirot's gaze softened. Mademoiselle, you saw what she wished you to see. The hairpin in the arbor, it was yours, dropped when you met. Clara earlier, arguing over her flirtations. But you did not kill her. Mrs. Fowler's defiance crumbled, her voice a hoarse whisper. I didn't mean to kill her. She pushed me, threatened to ruin me. I only meant to scare her, but the dagger, it happened so fast. She sank back into her chair, tears streaming down her face, her confession echoing in the stunned silence. Inspector Japp stepped forward, his face grim. That's enough, Mrs. Fowler. You're coming with us. He signaled the constable, who gently but firmly escorted the sobbing widow from the room. Sir Reginald rose, his voice hoarse. Monsieur Poirot, how can we thank you? This horror in our home. Poirot bowed, his expression one of quiet resolve. Sir Reginald, the truth, it is its own reward. But let us mourn Mademoiselle Henshaw, and learn from the secrets that brought such tragedy. As the guests dispersed, their faces a mixture of relief and sorrow, Hastings approached Poirot, his voice awed. "Poirot, you did it again. The glove, the shawl, the dagger, how did you know it was her?" Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile, his eyes distant. "The human heart, Hastings, it betrays itself in the smallest details, the smear of blood, the hidden shawl, the tremble of a hand, the little grey cells, they see what others miss." He adjusted his cuffs, his gaze lingering on the now empty ballroom. Marston Hall, with its grandeur and its shadows, had yielded its secret, and Hercule Poirot, with his unerring pursuit of truth, had brought order to its chaos. The truth was unveiled, but the echoes of Clara's death would linger, a reminder of the fragile line between love, greed, and betrayal. The end.